doesn't just write love songs. She documents emotional patterns. For nearly 2 decades, the world has watched her fall in love with different men, different energies, different promises. And yet, the endings feel familiar. Breakup, reflection, reinvention. Then the cycle begins again. From youthful fairy tale romances to intense, all-consuming connections, Taylor's relationships seem to follow an invisible blueprint, not because she chooses the wrong people, but because she keeps stepping into the same emotional archetypes. The muse, the protector, the misunderstood genius, the emotionally unavailable hero. Each relationship looks new on the surface, but underneath, the role never changes. And that's what makes Taylor Swift's love life so fascinating, because her story isn't about bad luck in love. It's about how unresolved emotional needs quietly rewrite the same story again and again. And sometimes the songs know the truth before the heart does. When Taylor Swift falls in love, she doesn't just choose a person, she steps into a role. Over time, her relationships reveal recurring emotional archetypes, each offering something she deeply desires, and something that eventually becomes impossible to sustain. There is the muse, the man who inspires creativity, who fuels passion, lyrics, and late-night confessions. He makes her feel seen, until the attention shifts and the muse becomes a memory. Then there is the protector, private, grounded, emotionally reserved. He offers safety from chaos and public scrutiny. But safety without emotional expansion slowly turns into confinement. And then comes the misunderstood genius, charismatic, complicated, emotionally intense. He mirrors Taylor's own depth, but often needs saving more than he can give. Each archetype promises fulfillment. Each one ends in the same realization. The role was never meant to last. Because archetypes don't grow, people do, if the pattern is challenged. Behind every repeating love story, there is an emotional engine, something invisible, but powerful enough to steer choices, attraction, and attachment. For Taylor Swift, that engine has always been intensity. Not chaos, not drama, but emotional intensity, the kind that feels meaningful, the kind that fuels art, the kind that makes love feel larger than life. Taylor doesn't fear heartbreak. She fears emotional flatness. So when a relationship begins to stabilize, when passion softens into routine, something inside her starts searching for more. More feeling, more meaning, more story. This is why familiar archetypes return. They don't just bring love, they bring emotion strong enough to write about. But intensity has a cost. It burns fast. It demands constant fuel, and eventually it consumes connection. And when it does, the song ends, but the engine keeps running.
Every intense love eventually reaches a moment of tension. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The moment when emotion alone can no longer hold the relationship together. For Taylor Swift, this is where the archetype begins to crack. The muse loses inspiration. The protector becomes distant. The misunderstood genius becomes exhausting. And suddenly, the very qualities that once felt magnetic start to feel limiting. This is the breaking point, not because love disappears, but because it stops evolving. Intensity without depth becomes pressure. Passion without presence becomes performance. And when love turns into something that must be maintained instead of experienced, something inside Taylor pulls away. This isn't impulsiveness, it's self-preservation disguised as reinvention. The relationship doesn't end in anger, it ends in awareness, and awareness, once triggered, cannot be ignored.
Self-sabotage doesn't look like chaos. It looks like clarity. For Taylor Swift, it often arrives as a quiet decision, the moment she realizes she has outgrown the role she once stepped into willingly. She doesn't explode relationships, she exits them gracefully. But here's the hidden pattern. Each time a relationship reaches emotional complexity, when love requires patience instead of inspiration, presence instead of intensity, the old reflex returns. Reinvention, new music, new identity, new narrative. This is where self-sabotage becomes subtle, not by destroying love, but by leaving before it can transform. Because transformation asks for stillness, and stillness offers no song. So the cycle resets, not because the partner failed, but because the relationship stopped feeding the emotional engine. And in that moment, starting over feels safer than staying. When a pattern repeats long enough, it stops feeling like a mistake. It starts feeling like identity. For Taylor Swift, each ending becomes material. Each heartbreak becomes art. Each reinvention becomes proof of resilience. But repetition always leaves a hidden cost. The cost isn't public failure, it's emotional fatigue. Over time, love stops feeling like discovery and starts feeling like anticipation. Anticipation of the ending. Because when the pattern is familiar, the future feels predictable, even when the person is new. This is the quiet aftermath. Trust becomes cautious. Hope becomes conditional. Connection becomes curated. And while success continues to grow, intimacy begins to narrow. The world sees evolution, but inside, the same lesson waits, unresolved. Until repetition forces a choice. Keep rewriting the same ending, or finally stay long enough to change it. Love karma isn't destiny. It's repetition with intention. The same emotional lesson returns until it's fully lived, not just written about, not just survived, but transformed. For Taylor Swift, love has always been honest. She feels deeply, she reflects publicly, she evolves creatively. But karma doesn't ask for expression, it asks for presence. Because patterns don't end when we understand them, they end when we respond differently, when intensity no longer replaces intimacy, when reinvention pauses long enough for stillness, when love is allowed to exist without becoming a story. If Taylor's next chapter is different, it won't be because the archetype changed. It will be because she stayed after the music softened. Because love karma doesn't disappear, it waits until we're ready to stop repeating and start choosing.